o'clock. I will open up the meeting. And the first item on the agenda is the acceptance of the minutes of the April 4th meeting.
Second.
Are there any additions, changes, etc.? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? The next item on here is potential audit topics, and I guess I'll turn it over to Director Young and Supervisor Henry. Good morning.
Christine Young, Director of Audits for the LBA, and with me is Jay Henry, the Performance Audit Supervisor. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, what we'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is maybe just walk you through the spreadsheet
Yeah.
of the 10-year status of our performance audits.
Yeah, please do that.
And Jay will walk you through the columns and what each item means.
All right, so I think we found 30 reports based on the last 10 years. You'll notice sometimes there's more than one agency connected to a report. For example, the mental health workforce licensing audit, they dealt with 4 boards and the Office of Professional Licensing and Certification. So there's actually 5 agencies that should respond to that one audit. So there's more than 30 lines here. We gave the year that it was released, the number of observations that were in the report. We gave how many of the observations that the agency said they have fully addressed, and also the percentage. We also found out how many updates they have done, and also the year of the last update. After we did all that, we sort of reorganized it to try to give an idea of at least how we might look at it, as far as the red ones on the top being ones that most of them have not provided an update. And then the green ones where they have reported that they have fully addressed all the observations. I'd like to just mention that when they say they fully address all the observations, that really means they fully addressed the observations they agreed with. It may not mean that they accepted everything we said. And if you notice, we have number concurred in part, and number don't concurred. That's their response to our observation. So sometimes they'll say we fully concur, and they're going to do everything that we recommended. Sometimes it's partially, and then sometimes they say nothing. So you'll notice some audits, they didn't really fully concur with a lot of observations, and yet they'll say they've 100%, addressed everything, but they addressed everything they agreed with. So anyway, that's just a warning there, I guess.
So while we're on that subject, let me ask a question. If you go into do a performance audit and they don't concur with your observation, right? Why is that? Is it they need to update a manual, or what's going on there?
They may not.
They found another way to do it?
They may not agree with our recommendation. Yeah. They may not agree that even there's a weakness. So there's like 2 things going on. We think there's a weakness. Maybe we say they're not following the law in this respect, and we think they ought to do something, and they look at it differently and say, no, I think we're doing it over here. And you see that in the reports, because we'll have our recommendations, they'll have the agency response, and they'll say we concur, we don't concur, we concur in part. And then if we really don't like what they say, we'll have a rejoinder saying to tell the users of the report, yeah, we really don't agree with what they're saying. So you'll see that in the reports, but there's nothing in law that says they have to do anything we suggest. It's really, we're making recommendations to management, and it's up to them to make changes. And then legislate, you have the opportunity to have oversight. You can challenge them on it. And you can have disagreements over things. That's fine. I think that's,
Yeah, I
So it
think that
covers it.
pretty much covers it, yep.
Representative Weiler.
What you don't show is the number of times that you've said legislative fix needed to be done and whether or not it was in fact done.
yeah.
That's not in here, right?
We didn't look at that. Yeah, that would have taken more time to go into that detail. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we also, at the end, we have a final update. So the ones in green, you'll notice they've said, this is our final update. And in the executive order, the second executive order, that's when they stop updating, because they said, we've done everything we're going to do. There are some notes here. I would like to mention some of the notes on some of these reports, just.
Please do.
Yep. Interestingly, the prescription drug monitoring program, which is sort of up in the middle of the red area, it used to be in the pharmacy board, and it used to be part of the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification back in 2017. And when we were doing this, I sort of remembered that program moved over to HHS, and we had to do some research. It was moved over in HHS in 2021, and I was thinking, I wonder if they even know that there's an old audit of this program. I contacted the internal auditor over at HHS, who happens to be here behind me, and said, guess what? You've taken over a program that has an old audit, and I told you before, HHS has been very good at updating the reports, and they've actually, within 2 weeks or so, reviewed everything, and they produced an updated report. I have it here if you want to look at it. They've also submitted it to Transparency New Hampshire. There's people from the program if you have questions. But basically, they've said they fully resolved 24 of 26 observations. And I think they substantially resolved one and partially resolved one. So if you want to see an example of what an update looks like, I can hand that out.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Let's see.
Yes, Representative Rivera.
Regarding that, will you then be updating this spreadsheet to accommodate to?
Well, yeah, this is just an example of what you can do. You guys are in charge of it, but I would move this down into, the yellow area, given what we're doing here. This is very typical of what we find online, this kind of report. They give you a little description of everything they've done.
Thank you.
I think the one they partially resolved is like rulemaking, which you all know is complicated. So I think the purpose of this exercise, you've already had your first success in that an agency has reacted to a question, and, this is what you want, I think, as a committee. While you're looking at that, I'll just mention, I had another note on the Liquor Commission, Division of Enforcement and Licensing. They said they're at 68% sort of completed, but it's really higher than that. When you look at some of the observations that they've partially done, like they may have like completed 4 out of 5 recommendations. So, in a sense, it's higher than that percentage. Just wanted to give you a heads up for that. And human rights, they just released a report. Wouldn't expect an update, right now, or they'll be coming up for an update real soon. I think that's it. If you have questions about these columns, and
So regarding the prescription, this is the prescription drug monitoring board update, correct?
yes,
And there's 2 listed in here, lines 14 and 15. Are those actually both representing the same in the spreadsheet?
we're in the spreadsheet because, they both had observations they had to respond to back in 2017, but now that the program has left them. Pharmacy has nothing to do with it now, and OPLC has nothing to do with it. So that's why it's a little weird.
But does this relate to both rows, 14 and 15, or only row 15, or?
But they could answer that better than I could.
Okay.
But not everything we recommended to the Board of Pharmacy and OPLC probably doesn't even match what's happening at HHS. Maybe in some of it, I've heard, I just talked to them and they said, you know, a lot of things had already been fixed. It's just no one, you know, I think only one report was updated in all that time.
So the 14 and 15 referred to two different reports, not one, originally, as it was?
Well, no, it was one report, but it had two agencies that we made recommendations for. Yeah, because the Board of Pharmacy was part of OPLC.
OPLC.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Representative Wellman?
Didn't we do an audit of special education?
Recently, yes, we did.
Does that show up? It doesn't show
Down
up.
at the very bottom, you'll
Am I-
see,
Oh, okay.
yeah, special ed
Just-
dispute resolution.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and
I
here's,
kept missing that
yeah,
one.
and here's like an example where they agreed with, fully concurred with 9 of the 20 observations, partially concurred with 11, and now they said they're 100% completed.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
That's helpful.
Senator?
So again, when I'm looking at this list, the ones that give me pause and concern, given what's going on, is the mental health workforce licensing that has no action and nothing done. Understanding it's been 2 years since that was done. We started mental health workforce to BMHP all the way down to OPLC, right? They've had this audit for at least a year and a half, 2 years, depending on when it was released in 23, and they've done absolutely nothing when we're in the middle of
Or
at least they're not reporting.
They're reporting it,
They're
yeah.
not reporting anything.
Yeah,
Let's put it
that could
way.
be that.
I'll correct myself and say they're not reporting any actions in a time when everybody seems to agree we have a mental health crisis. So for me, Mr. Chair, I'd be interested in either bringing them in and make them respond to, either in writing or in person, the actions, and get them to update this list as one of our first priorities.
How does the rest of the board feel about them? Yeah. I think it's pretty unanimous.
So I guess what I'd say is for the next meeting, either have a written response from them or ask if they don't send one, have them show up so we can ask them the questions on when do you plan on getting this resolved? You know, and if they're willing to give it to us in writing, that's fine. If they want to show up, then that's fine too. I'm okay with either one, but.
Representative?
And just to be clear, that's a lot of different boards and a lot of different people, and I don't disagree that they all ought to be here. I just want to make sure that we understand how much work we're creating for these folks to get them here. But I think I too believe it's a good idea to find out where we're at and what's going on.
Yeah, I'll just mention, there are a lot of boards in the red area up here. If you look through it, you'll see.
Yeah.
And boards are hard to deal with because, again, they're meeting once a month. Once they get over their audit, they're shell shocked. And then if they can forget about the audit too, if you get new members. And also the Office of Professional Licensure, I think there's been a change in leadership from what I understand.
D-Jury,
So, I mean, we worked well with the former executive director. She really, I think, understood audits at that point. We probably need to connect with the new director just to give him a heads up, or her, I'm not sure. But dealing with boards is also, they meet once a month. That means even if you send a letter, they got to wait till the next meeting so they can talk about it. Then they got to do something about it. It's when we work with them, it's like it can be a 2 or 3 month process to get them to do something because of how they meet. So you may run into that, just telling them, hey, someone needs to show up here or you need to produce something. It may not happen like DHHS did. They're able to just get things done.
Representative Weber?
And I just want to note that, again, that this is, working with these boards in particular has been historically very difficult because the boards are composed of professional people who sometimes are less willing to listen to anybody who doesn't have their specific qualification past their name. And I speak as one who's an attorney, so I know that happens in all professions. I think that plus the interaction between the board doing the substantive regulation and the OPLC, which has been a long process of working on the licensing aspect, I think it's a really good thing to be going back over because there's been a lot of change over time, particularly for some of these. And I think it's something that has been a perennial problem. So focusing on it is, it may not be an easy process, but I think there are some others that we might want to look at too. But I agree that this is absolutely the place to start.
I think we all recognize that the current voluntary system isn't working too well. If you look at a number of red items here, and it's been many years in some cases, and no correspondence, no follow-up on the audits in terms of the current system where that's voluntary and it isn't happening. It has nothing to do with you guys. It's not your fault. It's the current system. And I think we need to look at changing that in some manner, some simple manner that doesn't put a burden, a huge burden on you guys, but motivates the people who are audited to respond to the observations. And I think that's what we're trying to do here is figure out a system that will work, and we're open to ideas,
Chair, if I may. So again, I think a letter, I don't think we need the whole board here. I think the chairman of the board, just come in and tell us what's going on. We give them 30 days notice that we're asking you to show up on this date. We're going to be talking about your audit. Tell us what's going on. And he may say, I got to go back to my board. That's fine, but let's put him on the chair and let him say that. Is kind of my opinion, is that it's the only way we're going to get progress, I think, is by using a little bit of, the chairman of the board and the legislature's asking you to show up at your performance audit because you have an outstanding performance audit item that's not been addressed. Please come prepared, ready to talk about your performance audit. And let them just show up. Invite every single chair of those boards into the meeting. Tell them the legislature is requesting you attend this meeting to speak about your performance audit. And again, I think that alone, just like it did with DHHS, might spur some updates for us alone, just by having them. And everyone else will start looking at this list going, I better get in front of it before I have to be in front of the board, in front of the committee.
Representative Weber?
I think that part of the problem is for some of these boards, the idea that there was an audit got lost many changes of personnel ago. So I think that getting back into them, and I would very much like to see us do that gradually as we get the first ones done, pick the next round and get them started. I don't want, we can't do everybody all at once because we've got other things to do, but I'd like, there are some other ones on there that I think we could do as time goes on.
It seems like a good logical starting point to me. Anybody disagree?
No.
So why don't we go forward on that basis?
So, Mr. Chair, are we asking LBA to draft letters to each of the boards listed under the mental health workforce licensing, requesting that the chairman or his designee show up prepared to talk about the performance audit? Is that-
We do have a draft letter, not knowing exactly what you're going to do,
Darn,
which,
crystal ball is working great.
yeah,
Anticipated this, yes.
which, I mean, you could use as a starting point. I don't know if you just want the chair to work with it or the committee can look at it. And again, not knowing how you were going to do this, but it's pretty close to what you're talking about.
I think the chair. can-
Okay, we can,
If everyone else is okay with that,
Absolutely,
he
yes.
can work with LBA
Yeah.
directly.
because it'll, yeah,
Finalize the language.
yeah, it will go out under his signature, with, from this committee. And it'll, basically they'll say, deal with us, the LBA, for
Right.
arranging it. And some of them will be like, what is this about? And I think we'll have to talk to a few of them. That's right.
I just asked that when you send it to the chair, you send a copy of the audit report, so he knows what he's bucking into. And he
Remember
has a
what it
copy
is.
of it, so make sure he's in the letter and the report, the audit report that we're talking about, so he knows what he has to find answers for. Because in case of change of staff.
It seems to me that that's a good positive start, and maybe the word will get around, and there'll be more compliance with with responding to the audits.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. And, when you look at the list, best case scenario is maybe some of these boards and agencies at the top have made progress, but they just weren't aware of the reporting requirement on Transparent New Hampshire. So it will be good if we find out that that's the case. But either way, we should know what the situation is.
Ooh, I don't know who was first, Representative Walden? I was just going the order.
I just wondered, how much follow-up do we do after the audit is done? And do these organizations that have not completed their recommendations, do they get a yearly reminder, or?
They do not. This process is all self-reporting. So that's why it's a good idea that this committee is embarking on this, project to bring them in and try to understand what the current status of the observations in these reports is.
I would think particularly with these volunteer boards, that a yearly reminder, I mean, you might have all new volunteers on it that didn't even know there was an audit.
Right.
That's kind of what I was.
So,
I think the process, the Transparent New Hampshire process, it's all in the executive order. So this was the Governor Hassan, I think, under her administration that set out this process. But they just didn't have that one piece at the end, like DAS, remind them, or I guess, well, they couldn't tell us,
Mainly hear from
LGA do it. But I mean, no one was there to say,
remind them.
what if they don't submit it? What happens? And basically, nothing happens until, you guys reviewed it and said, why aren't they, updating this?
Representative Webb?
I was just thinking that some of them may have been complied with and just not reported. The other thing that may have happened, and obviously it happened with the Prescription Drug Board, is that the statutes may have changed in material ways over some of these times. So, for some of them, the answer may be does not apply anymore because something happened to it. But the other thing is that we always have the option. This was done by executive order, but if we don't find that there's a significant degree of progress, we could always decide to take statutory action on that as well, I assume. I'm never really clear about the interaction with the executive departments and what we can order them internally, but.
Representative
Weiler. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I wish we'd had this when we did the review for the budget. Thankfully, the Senate, if they haven't reviewed all these agencies now, when they're going to be reviewing, they'll have this before them to say, by the way, I've just looked at this audit you did so many years ago, and what have you done about that? And it might be a way to remind them that, there are people reading these audits, that they probably assume that most people are not familiar with the audits and can just go along about their business and ignore what was written before. So next time we do any review on budgets, we're going to be looking at these things that How come you haven't responded? Thank you.
I'll recognize Representative Lang for a motion.
I move that we allow the chair and the LBA to draft a letter to each of the board chairmen, asking that the chairman or their designee come in to speak to the audit discrepancies or things that haven't been accomplished through the performance audit for everything starting with mental health, workforce licensing, those various boards. Each will get a letter to come to the next meeting.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We'll have a vote, show of hands. I guess it's. Okay. It's one abstention. Otherwise, everyone voted to go forward with the motion.
I'm going to ask the next meeting, I think there was mentioned last meeting, you said the first Friday of every month. Is that still the case?
So the next meeting would be, it's later on the agenda, I was going to talk about it, but we can jump in now if you want. The
Yeah,
next meeting, we had scheduled again the first Friday, which would be June 6th. And I don't know what day we do, when do we have to be out of the LOE?
We'll be out of here by then.
So I'd recommend, Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, I can speak to my aide who manages State House 100, the committee room right there in the State House, and see if we can get that committee room for this time period.
Yeah.
I'll confirm the location. What's that?
They told us we had to be out by what, the 22nd?
So that's why we use State House. I'll confirm it with my aide, but we'll book State House 100 for the same time slot.
So if you're able to get it, you'll let Mr. Henry know.
What's it?
You let Mr. Henry know if you're able to get it.
Yeah, I'll know right away. I'll let you know.
Representative Whitman.
If what we've been told is that all rooms have to have all the representative stuff out of them, but we don't know which rooms they're going to keep open for the committee of conference process, but we were told that some of the rooms they will start immediately, and I assume that starts with taking all the furniture over to Granite Place. So we were told that as of May 22nd, there are going to be a lot of rooms that are completely unusable, if not torn up. So that was just what
Director,
we
Director
heard.
Young.
Mr. Chairman, just an FYI, that Friday, June 6th, I will be out of town. I won't be able to attend that meeting, but I have full confidence in Jay to handle that meeting. Just wanted to let you know that.
I think we probably ought to look ahead to July too. I don't know whether we should be meeting in July. A lot of people are on
We're
vacation.
usually forbidden the building in July.
Yeah,
July and August.
yeah. So,
Standing committees are usually different. It's like JALCAR meets in July and August, as well as other committees meet. So the joint committees can still meet as long as we have a place to meet. And I'll just ask, I asked my aide already. She looks like she's about to answer back. I asked to book that for the first Friday of every month until we figure something else out. So she said, yes, we'll do it in State House 100. She can, well, you'll need to do the scheduling, just notify Sonia Caldwell, my aide, and she'll book out the room and you send out, whoever sends out the normal notification for this committee will send it out.
Yeah, July is actual Independence Day, so that might not be
We'll
real
worry
good
about
for
June. We'll take
anybody.
up the rest of the summer after their first meeting, next meeting.
to move on with potential audit topics, Director Young, you mentioned last meeting you might have some potential audit topics for the future.
I think I was just referring to, we would entertain hearing about additional audit topics that you may be interested in. We're certainly not ready to start on those yet, but we'd like to get our list going again. So if you have any ideas, we're ready to listen.
Representative Wyler?
I had written down on June 30th, 9 o'clock, room 100, capital project. Oh, that's a different committee, I'm sorry. I was confused for a minute over my own abbreviations. Disregard.
Representative Aaron?
One of the areas that I'm so interested in is the special education audit never looked at local school districts. And that is really, I think, where many of the issues are. And having spent time with these folks and also with the LBA himself, it is possible to audit local school districts. And I think we ought to look into doing that, at least at some level, to understand how the special education process is working in the local districts, since that seems to be where a lot of the problems are that we're learning about in the budgeting process.
Representative Weber?
I'm hoping that somebody will explain to me how we are allowed to audit something that is not an executive department.
Because we give them money.
I believe the LBA can speak to that, and if it's not the two of you, I'm sure Mike can.
I can get the language.
Right. I'm not sure what statute it is, but I believe we are allowed to audit 5 non-state entities. Is it per fiscal year
I think it's over a number of years.
or over a number of years, maybe in a 5-year period? Don't quote me on that, but our statute does allow us to audit
Okay.
a certain number of non-state entities.
So may I have a follow-up? So that is clarifying things, because I was remembering that there was significant pushback from the Department of Education when we wanted to audit the entity that administers the education freedom accounts. Am I correct in thinking that each school district would be a separate entity? So we would have to pick a school district or school districts?
That would be my interpretation, that each district would be considered one non-state entity.
Right.
We have never, just for the record, we have never done that. We have never audited a non-state entity yet. So that would be new for us. But again, in statute, the statute reads, it's RSA 14:31A. It says, the audit division, the authority of the legislative budget assistant to conduct post audits on non-state agencies shall be limited to 5 entities in a 5-year period.
Okay, so it's basically 1 a year.
Of that change, that.
Yeah, I'm not sure the year of the change, but the last time this law was updated was 2007.
I think it was an addition at some point. I think you may be right.
It seems to me that if we're going to do that, the ideal situation would be to find a town or a district, school district, where the school board invited us in. Now, whether that's possible to find or not, it seems to me that would be the ideal situation, because then you'd be welcomed rather than forcing yourselves on them, you know. I don't know how we go about that, but Representative Weber.
That was a thought that had crossed my mind as well. And my concern is that anybody who might want to invite us is probably not experiencing the kinds of issues that gave rise to the thought that we might want to look at this. The thing that I think we're all, I mean, obviously, initially, you folks are going to have to give some thought to is there's a huge difference between auditing Manchester and auditing Roxbury, which has a town budget of slightly less than a large mobile home park. And they tuition all their students, so that wouldn't be very helpful. But, you know, we've got such a vast array. And to my mind, and I'm perfectly willing to be persuaded by more thought on how we do this, but to my mind, auditing one of the many school boards, school districts, is very unlikely to produce a report that is applicable to more than just that school district. And I think that what I would like to see is that if we come up with something, we'd like to come up with something that is more comprehensive. So I'm just talking myself through the thought process. So I think that it's perfectly worthy of more study, but I think that we're going to need to study it a lot to make sure that something's designed that will give us the information that we need for further action.
Representative Weiler, or if,
I think that,
sorry.
So my suggestion would be to actually hit a couple of districts. I agree with you. I think you want to go large, like a city. I think you want to go medium, like, you know, not a, whatever the town was you mentioned with the big mobile park, but something in the town side. We need some insight into how special education coding is happening. There's been huge growth in this area, and it's not clear why. And it's having a huge impact on our budgeting, in particular, making it very difficult to budget because it's not clear what's going to happen from year to year, other than the fact it's growing like crazy. And this is where I'm trying to remember, Senator Reagan, when I first came on this committee, this is exactly what he had asked for, and then basically was told, kind of like this kind of discussion here, well, we really can't do that. And I dug into this to learn what we just learned here as well, that we can do this. And we learned from the special education audits that have been going on, great as they've been, they have not addressed the fundamental issues that Senator Reagan had originally raised regarding special education and how kids are coded and why they are coded, why they aren't coded, parents' concerns with the coding or lack of coding, and so forth. My biggest concern, I mean, there's a lot of issues there, obviously. My biggest concern has been the financial aspect, since that's, you know, sitting on the budget committee, what we deal with. But there's certainly, and I grant you, we're not going to learn about the whole state, but we need some insight, I think, at that level in terms of what's going on. Because if you do it, and I used to be on the finance committee in my town, in Ware, and on the school board piece of it, we have 2 school boards in town, and it's a black hole to townspeople. When they go to the local school budget meetings, including being on the finance committee, where you can ask a lot of questions, can't ask any questions about special education because privacy and all that kind of thing. So you all can go deeper than that because you, as the auditors, are able to have that kind of access, if you will. So that's why I raised it as a possibility. If it doesn't fit right now, you know, we can consider it, you know, down the road. I mean, I get that you're very busy, I understand that. But I do think it's a worthwhile topic to at least put on the table for discussion.
Representative Weiler.
the way I would proceed is review the DOE 25s, which should show the amount of money spent on special ed, and pick out the ones that have the highest percentage of special ed coding, say the top 10, and then we write a letter asking for more detail, signed by the chairs of the House Finance Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, both members signing that letter saying, we need to know why you're so far out of balance with the rest of the state and the rest of the country, that you have so many if we're not just picking on one, if we get probably the top 10, then we may find out, may at least alert them that, hey, you're overdoing this. We may get some answers back, we may not, but I think it might be a way to proceed and get more attention from the superintendent when it's coming from the finance chairs. This is something we'll be looking at again, so it might be worth a try. Instead of trying to dig into one, just look at the DOE 25, what did you spend for special ed? Write them a letter. How many different codings do you have? Who's done it? How many different, and what's the history, and so on and so forth. And these are things that escape the notice of the public. As Representative Urfa said, they don't get these questions answered at the school board meetings. Thank you.
Senator Lane.
So again, I think I agree. I was thinking, looking at the ratios based on the number of students and the number of special education spending. And I think look at that top list, but I also think it's important to look at the bottom list. Like what are the schools that are doing it right doing? Right, as well, right? Is that how are you keeping your special ed costs so low as compared to this school that has huge special ed costs as a ratio to number of students? I think that there's reason to do both, and to understand what might, lessons learned kind of thing for either side. But I was going to ask that maybe LBA can bring back in the June meeting. We don't have the current list of what is currently open again for existing audits, as well as what have already been previously approved audits that are in the hopper, and then what the expectations of when they're going to be completed. So maybe in June you can bring that back so we can remind us what is the current open or in the pipeline audits, when they're expected to be done, and then from there we can look at any other agencies we might want to do. But I do think that Representative Weiler's on the right track of viewing some sort of ratio for the student. I just don't know if we can do 5 in 5 years. I mean, we can do 2 in 1 year and pick one high and one low and do an audit of each in a given year. So when it comes back, we can do a compare and contrast to see what the two audits differences are. Might be an appropriate way to do it. And then we can ask DOE to look at the special ed funding and say, okay, here's 2 school districts we recommend that if you're going to audit, one high, one low, and let DOE pick for us. So it's not any member here picking on a community.
Representative Weber.
I think that's a really interesting approach, and I think it's particularly interesting from a finance point of view, but it's also interesting from the educational point of view, because what we might be finding on the low ones is that they're just not coding kids who ought to be coded. And I understand that that's more headaches for everybody who sits on finance, but it's headaches for everybody else. But it's also kids who are getting lost in the shuffle, which is exactly what some parents have been complaining about. And it's important to know where we're at either way. So I think the listing itself would be really interesting just to take a look at.
Myself, I've always thought that some of these larger SAUs would be a logical target where they provide supervision of the special education for multiple towns, and I wouldn't count them out as a target. Somewhere between an individual school district and a city, a big city school district. So I think we need to look at, and the approaches that have been brought forward presumably would do that, because they'd fall into those categories. Yep.
So do we want to task somebody on the committee to reaching out to DOE and maybe doing those ratio numbers for us and getting a list of school districts and students and average costs for special ed, and see what that looks like, and then we can make some recommendations based on that list. Ask them for the top 10 and the lowest 10, and we can make a recommendation list from that to, make a motion to move forward with an audit on 2 local school districts and pick them out. Is that what we think as a plan to do?
Are you volunteering?
I'm willing to volunteer. If you just know what ratios you're looking for, I'll have the conversations.
I think the ratio is total ADM versus spending, right?
Spe-
Special ed spending.
Just
Do a
spending
ratio.
count versus student count?
Right. Representative Weiler, you agree with that?
Well, if we're looking at special ed, I'd look at the percentage of special ed because our state is way above the national average. And I think some of it is some of these spurious coding things like, you know, anxiety. That, I remember going to visit a charter school. We have 3 students here that are here because they had codings of anxiety. Once they're here, they don't have it anymore. So, you know, that kind of thing. So some of this coding, if we're looking at the abuse of special ed, and here's this school board that has 19% versus the state average of probably 13%, which is still high. And maybe there'll be another school district that's only 7%. So that's the thing I think that would be a key to what's happening in your special ed coding in your particular district, which never is really allowed to look at. Anyway, that's my thought. But as you say, it could be the percentage of students, or it could be the, you know, the total number. But the percentage, I think, would be a big clue. Thanks.
So again, I would, again, I think it's a combination of both, right? If you have a very high special ed population as compared to the rest of the state, that's one thing to look at. Are we having excessive coding, and on the opposite side, if you're very low, is it, you're not coding enough, right? And so I think, again, it's a combination of both total student count to number of special ed kids, as well as special ed kids to spending. Right, and I think
It's
Frank,
both.
I think
Exactly.
Frank would be able to get us a list of, the commission will be able to look at that and give us the outliers and give us a list of those outliers, and then we can make a decision on what district we would like to look at that of those outliers, and then.
Good.
No, I'll have that conversation with them.
Representative Weber.
And if it's, I don't know how labor intensive producing that report is. If it's something that they can just press a button and generate a report, it would be very interesting to see the whole state ranked top to bottom.
I would bet their Caitlin person that does numbers could do it within the hour.
Okay, well, if it's possible to do the whole thing top to bottom, then I just think that would be really interesting. So, but I don't want to pile on unnecessary work just for my gratification. But if it's something that somebody can just generate those numbers quickly, I think that would be really helpful to have the whole set. And then we can pick from everything.
So,
And thank you for doing it.
Mr. Henry.
Yeah, just want to remind, you probably remember, we are in the middle of a big special ed audit of the department right now. It's looking at how the department is managing the program and how they're overseeing the state. And that would probably inform what you want to do in the future. Time-wise, we're still looking at the end of the year. And it's you know, it's one of the reports we keep saying most likely going to be big. So anyway, it's a topic, I think you can get ready for it, but you may want to see that report, and that will maybe answer questions or generate questions for you for further audits. So anyway.
Well, I think what Representative Earth is saying is that he can get us what we need in terms of the outline, you know, and that
If not,
shouldn't-
I'll report back.
right. That shouldn't put a huge burden on you people, so. Okay, I think we've got a plan to move forward, and we'll go on to the next thing, which is other business. Is there any other business? Okay,
Second?
we've already done the date of the next meeting, so the place will get confirmed, and
It's confirmed.
it's confirmed, okay. So we'll be in room 100 on June 6th at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock work for everybody? Yeah, that's, we're getting into the summer months, so we're always gonna have one or two that have a conflict. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll close the meeting.